The garage door was rattling. I could hear it from the driveway as I pulled my suitcase from the trunk, the sound cutting through the quiet Arizona evening like something desperate, something wrong. The sun had just started to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, and my house looked darker than it should have been. No lights on, no movement through the windows. Something was very wrong. I'd been gone for 10 days. 10 days in Santa Fe with my book club friends, celebrating Thanksgiving away from the memories that haunted every corner of this house. 10 days of trying to forget that last Thanksgiving, when my daughter Sarah was still alive, when she'd carved the turkey with her 8-year-old son Lucas perched on her hip, laughing at something ridiculous he'd said. 10 days of trying to be a person again instead of just a grandmother drowning in grief. The rattling got louder as I approached the front door. It wasn't the wind. It was rhythmic, frantic, like someone was shaking the door from the inside. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my keys. The front door was locked, which was normal, but when I pushed it open, the house was cold. The thermostat read 58 degrees, in Arizona, in November, and then I heard it. A small voice, hoarse and weak, coming from the direction of the garage. "Grandma? Grandma, are you there?" Lucas. My heart stopped. I dropped my suitcase right there in the entryway and ran toward the garage door, the one that connected to the house. It was locked. Not just closed, locked. With a padlock I'd never seen before, hanging from the outside like someone had deliberately sealed it shut. "Lucas!" I screamed, pressing my face against the door. "Baby, is that you? Are you in there?" The rattling stopped. For a moment there was silence, and I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the grief had finally broken something in my brain. But then I heard his voice again, small and scared and so tired. "Grandma, I'm scared. It's dark. Uncle Michael said it was a game, but he hasn't come back. I don't want to play anymore." Uncle Michael. My son. My youngest child. The one I'd left in charge of my grandson while I tried to take care of myself for once in the 3 years since my daughter died. I yanked at the padlock, but it held firm. "Lucas, honey, hold on. I'm going to get you out. Just hold on." I ran back through the house, searching for something, anything to break the lock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the hammer when I found it in the utility closet. I raced back to the garage door and swung the hammer against the padlock with every ounce of strength I had. It took 4 tries. 4 tries while my grandson called out to me from the other side, his voice getting weaker each time. When the lock finally broke, I threw the door open. The smell hit me first: urine, feces, and something else, something sour and desperate. The garage was pitch black, except for the dying light coming through the small window near the ceiling, and I fumbled for the light switch with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. When the fluorescent lights flickered on, I saw him. Lucas was huddled in the corner on a pile of old moving blankets, his clothes filthy, his face streaked with tears and dirt. There was an empty plastic bowl next to him and 3 empty water bottles, the kind I kept in cases in the garage for emergencies. An overturned bucket sat in the opposite corner. That's where the smell was coming from. My 8-year-old grandson had been using a bucket as a toilet because my son had locked him in our garage like an animal. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Oh my God, baby, I'm so sorry." I ran to him, dropping to my knees on the concrete floor, and pulled him into my arms. He was so light, lighter than he should have been. His skin felt hot and dry under my hands, and when I looked at his lips, they were cracked and bleeding. "How long, Lucas? How long have you been in here?" He buried his face in my shoulder, his small body shaking. "I don't know, Grandma. Uncle Michael said we were playing hide and seek. He said you wanted me to practice being brave while you were gone. He gave me the water bottles and said he'd come back with more food, but he didn't. I tried to be brave. I tried so hard. My heart shattered into pieces so small I knew I'd never be able to put them back together. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? My grandson. My voice cracked. My 8-year-old grandson has been locked in my garage. I don't know how long. He's dehydrated. He's been using a bucket. Please, I need an ambulance. Please." The dispatcher's voice became sharper, more focused. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me your address?" I rattled it off, barely recognizing my own voice. 427 Saguaro Ridge Drive, Phoenix. Please hurry. An ambulance is on the way. Is the child conscious? Yes. Yes, he's conscious, but he's weak. His lips are bleeding. He feels hot. Okay. I need you to give him small sips of water. Not too much at once. Can you do that? I was already moving, carrying Lucas into the kitchen, grabbing a clean glass from the cabinet. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it as I filled it from the tap. Lucas drank like he'd never seen water before, and I had to pull the glass away even though it killed me to do it. Slow, baby. Slow sips. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking me questions, keeping me focused. How old was I? 63. How old was my grandson? 8. Who locked him in the garage? My son, Michael. Where was my son now? I had no idea. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. They came through the front door I'd left standing open, and one of them, a young woman with kind eyes and steady hands, immediately knelt down next to Lucas. "Hey there, buddy. My name's Emma. I'm going to help you feel better, okay?" Lucas nodded weakly, and I watched as she checked his vitals, shining a light in his eyes, pressing her fingers against his wrist to count his pulse. Her partner, an older man with gray hair, started asking me questions. How long was he in there? I don't know. I left 10 days ago. I came back and found him like this. 10 days? His expression darkened. Was there food? There was an empty bowl. I don't know what was in it, or when it was last filled. And water? 3 empty bottles. The small ones, 16 ounces. Emma looked up from Lucas, her eyes meeting mine. "We need to transport him. He's severely dehydrated, and his core temperature is elevated. Where's the nearest hospital?" "Banner Desert Medical Center," I said automatically. "It's 10 minutes away." "We know it." She turned back to Lucas, her voice gentle. "Okay, sweetheart. We're going to take you for a ride in the ambulance. Your grandma can come with us. You're going to be just fine." But as they loaded him onto the gurney, as I climbed into the back of the ambulance and held his small, dirty hand in mine, I knew that nothing was fine. Nothing would ever be fine again. Because my son had done this. My son, the baby I'd rocked to sleep every night for the first year of his life. The toddler who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers. The teenager who'd struggled, yes, but who I'd thought was finally getting better after rehab. The adult who'd promised me that he was clean, that he could be trusted. I'd left my grandson in his care, and he'd locked him in a garage for 10 days with 3 bottles of water and whatever scraps of food had been in that bowl. The hospital was chaos. Doctors and nurses swarmed around Lucas the moment we arrived, hooking him up to IVs, checking his vitals, asking him questions in soft voices. I stood in the corner of the trauma bay, trying to stay out of the way, trying not to fall apart. A doctor approached me, a woman in her 40s with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm Dr. Chen. I'm treating Lucas. How is he?" The words came out as a whisper. Dehydrated, malnourished, and showing signs of exposure to extreme temperatures. We're getting fluids into him now, and we'll be admitting him for observation. Given what you've told the paramedics, I have to ask, did someone intentionally confine him? I nodded, unable to speak. Her expression hardened. "I need to contact Child Protective Services and the police. This is a mandatory report. Do you understand?" "Yes." My voice was hollow. "Yes, I understand." Within an hour, there were 2 police officers in the hospital waiting room asking me to explain everything. I told them about my trip to Santa Fe, about leaving Lucas with Michael, my 32-year-old son, about how Michael had struggled with addiction, but had been clean for 8 months, or so he'd told me. About coming home to the rattling garage door and the padlock, and finding my grandson in conditions that made me want to vomit every time I thought about them. "When did you last hear from your son?" the older officer asked. His name was Detective Martinez, and he had the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by human cruelty a long time ago. "The day before Thanksgiving. He sent me a text saying everything was fine, that Lucas was having a great time. That was 9 days ago." "And you tried to call him during your trip?" "3 times. It went straight to voicemail every time. I thought maybe his phone died, or he was busy with Lucas. I stopped, my throat closing. I thought everything was okay." "Mrs. Holloway, I need to ask you something difficult. Did your son have any reason to want to harm Lucas?" "No." The word came out too loud, too desperate. "No, he loved Lucas. He was there when Lucas was born. He held him in the hospital. He would never." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true, because Michael had done this. Michael had locked an 8-year-old child in a garage and left him there to suffer. "Mrs. Holloway, I need to ask you about your finances. Did your son have access to your bank accounts?" The question hit me like cold water. "No." "Why would he?" Detective Martinez exchanged a glance with his partner, a younger woman named Officer Chen. "We need you to check your accounts. Right now, if possible." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone, but I managed to pull up my bank app. The screen loaded, and I stared at the number in disbelief. My checking account showed a balance of $347. It should have had over $30,000. My savings account, the one I'd been building for 15 years, the one that was supposed to help with Lucas's college someday, showed 0. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Oh my God, he took it all." "How much?" Detective Martinez asked quietly. $68,000. Everything. He took everything. Officer Chen leaned forward. "Mrs. Holloway, we need to check your house. If he had access to your accounts, he may have taken other things as well. Do we have your permission to conduct a search?" I nodded numbly. Yes, whatever you need." They drove me home 2 hours later, after Lucas had been settled in a hospital room with fluids running into his arm and a child life specialist sitting beside his bed. I didn't want to leave him, but he'd finally fallen asleep, and the nurse told me gently that I should take care of what needed to be taken care of at home. What needed to be taken care of? As if there were simple tasks to be completed, errands to run, instead of the complete destruction of my family. When we pulled into my driveway, I saw more police cars, and my heart sank even further. Detective Martinez walked me inside, and I saw officers going through my house with gloves on their hands and cameras around their necks, documenting everything. "Mrs. Holloway, can you show me where you kept valuables? Jewelry, important documents, anything of significant monetary or sentimental value?" I led them to my bedroom, to the antique jewelry box that had been my mother's, and then her mother's before that. The one I'd planned to give to Sarah someday, and then after Sarah died, the one I'd been saving for Lucas to give to his future wife. It was gone. The entire jewelry box, with 3 generations of heirlooms inside. My grandmother's engagement ring, my mother's pearl necklace, the sapphire earrings my husband had given me on our 20th anniversary, just 6 months before he died. All of it, gone. I sank onto the bed, and the detective caught my arm, steadying me. "I'm sorry," he said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to try to remember what was in that box. We'll need a complete inventory for the investigation." Investigation? As if we were talking about a stranger, a random burglar, instead of my son, instead of the child I'd raised, the boy who'd slept in the room down the hall for 18 years. I started listing items from memory, my voice mechanical. Detective Martinez wrote everything down in his notebook, and Officer Chen took photos of the empty dresser top where the jewelry box had been. "Mrs. Holloway, did your son know about these items?" "Yes. I showed him my mother's ring once, a few years ago. He asked if it was worth anything, I thought he was just curious. My voice cracked. I was so stupid. You weren't stupid. You trusted your son. That's not stupid, it's human. But it felt stupid. It felt like the most foolish thing I'd ever done, leaving Lucas with someone I should have known couldn't be trusted. Someone who'd been arrested twice for possession, who'd been fired from 3 jobs in 2 years, who'd borrowed money from me a dozen times and never paid it back. I'd wanted so badly to believe he'd changed. After Sarah died, after I'd lost my daughter and had to become a mother again at 60 years old, I'd needed to believe that at least one of my children was going to be okay. Officer Chen came back into the bedroom. "Detective, we found something in the office." We followed her down the hall to the small room I used for paying bills and storing files. My filing cabinet stood open, folders scattered across the desk. "Your banking documents are gone," Officer Chen said, "along with your passport, birth certificate, and what looks like the title to your vehicle." "Why would he take those?" I asked, but even as I said it, I knew. Identity theft, or selling my car, or both. "We'll check for recent applications for credit cards or loans in your name," Detective Martinez said. "In the meantime, you'll need to freeze your credit and contact your bank about unauthorized transactions." The next few hours blurred together. Phone calls to banks, forms to fill out, a locksmith to change all the locks, even though we all knew Michael wasn't coming back here. He was smart enough for that, at least. It was past midnight when the police finally left, promising to be in touch as soon as they had any leads. I stood in my empty house, looking at the rooms that had been turned inside out by the search, and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My phone rang. The hospital. "Mrs. Holloway? This is Nurse Patricia from the pediatric unit. Lucas is awake and asking for you. He's very agitated. Would you be able to come back?" I was already grabbing my keys. Lucas was sitting up in the hospital bed when I arrived, his eyes wide and frightened, an IV still running into his small arm. The moment he saw me, he started crying. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have told. Uncle Michael said it was our secret. He said if I told, something bad would happen." I pulled him into my arms, careful of the IV line. "Oh, sweetheart, no. You did exactly the right thing. You told me the truth, and that's always, always the right thing to do. But Uncle Michael said the game had rules. He said I had to stay quiet and stay hidden until you came home. He said if I was really brave, he'd bring me a prize." My blood ran cold. "Lucas, baby, when did Uncle Michael leave?" "The day after you left for your trip. He came in the morning and said we were going to play a special game. He had the water bottles and a sandwich in a plastic bag. He said the game was to see how long I could be brave by myself. He locked the door and said he'd be back soon with more food." One day after I left, Michael had locked his nephew in the garage and disappeared. 9 days Lucas had been in there, with 1 sandwich and 3 bottles of water. "Did he say anything else?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lucas nodded against my shoulder. He was on the phone with someone. I heard him through the door before he locked it. He was talking about money, about how he needed to leave town quick. He said something about a dealer and about how he couldn't go back to jail. His small body started shaking again. "Grandma, is Uncle Michael in trouble?" "Yes, baby. He's in very big trouble. But you're not. You're safe now. I promise, you're safe." But I didn't feel safe. I felt terrified and furious and heartbroken all at once. My son, the child I'd given birth to and raised and loved, despite all his problems, had abandoned his nephew to die. Because that's what would have happened if I hadn't come home when I did. Another day or 2, maybe less, and Lucas would have been gone. Dr. Chen came in an hour later to check on Lucas. After examining him, she pulled me aside in the hallway. "He's doing better. The fluids are helping, and his temperature has come down. We'll keep him another 48 hours for observation, but I think he's going to be okay. Physically, at least." She paused. "Mrs. Holloway, I have to tell you, your grandson is incredibly lucky. Most children wouldn't have survived what he went through. The fact that he rationed his water, that he stayed calm enough to preserve his energy, that's remarkable. He's a very smart, very strong little boy. He got that from his mother, I whispered. My daughter, Sarah. She was the strongest person I've ever known. I'm sorry for your loss. Dr. Chen hesitated. The psychological impact of this trauma is going to be significant. Lucas will need therapy, possibly for years. Are you prepared for that? I'll do whatever he needs. Whatever it takes. She nodded. Child Protective Services will be conducting an investigation. It's standard procedure in cases like this. You'll need to cooperate fully. I will. I am. I just want him to be okay. I know. She put a hand on my shoulder. For what it's worth, from what I've seen, Lucas is in good hands with you. But that night, lying on the uncomfortable fold-out chair beside Lucas's hospital bed and listening to him whimper in his sleep, I wasn't so sure. I'd left him with Michael. I'd believed Michael when he said he was clean, when he promised he could be trusted. I'd failed to protect the one person I had left in this world. The next morning, Detective Martinez called. Mrs. Holloway, we've located your son. My heart stopped. Where? He was arrested in Las Cruces, New Mexico, trying to pawn your mother's engagement ring at a jewelry store. The store owner recognized it from the description we'd circulated. He's being held on multiple charges, including child endangerment, kidnapping, theft, and identity theft. Is he okay? I hated myself for asking. He's fine. High when they brought him in, but fine. Mrs. Holloway, we recovered some of your jewelry from his vehicle. Not all of it. He'd already sold most of it. But we got the engagement ring, a pearl necklace, and a few other pieces. And the money? Silence. Then, I'm sorry. The money's gone. He spent it on drugs and gambling. The bank is investigating the fraudulent transfers, but I have to be honest with you. The chances of recovery are slim. $68,000. My entire life savings, gone. Spent on drugs by my own son, while his nephew suffered in a locked garage. What happens now? I asked. He's being extradited back to Arizona. The district attorney's office will be in touch about the charges. Given the severity of what happened to Lucas, they're treating this very seriously. We're looking at significant prison time. Good, I said, and I meant it. I hope he gets everything he deserves. The trial took 9 months. 9 months of therapy for Lucas, who woke up screaming from nightmares about being locked in dark places. 9 months of meetings with lawyers, with victim advocates, with the district attorney who explained the charges in careful detail. 9 months of watching my son sit in that courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, refusing to look at me. The evidence was overwhelming. The police had found texts on Michael's phone, messages to his girlfriend Amber, discussing the plan to lock Lucas in the garage so they could have time to handle things before I got home. Messages about selling my jewelry, about withdrawing all my money, about heading to Mexico to start over. Amber testified against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. She sat on the witness stand and described how Michael had convinced her that I was a controlling mother who kept money from him that was rightfully his, how he'd said Lucas would be fine for a few days, how she'd helped him pawn my jewelry at shops across 3 states. The prosecutor played the 911 call I'd made that night. The entire courtroom heard Lucas's weak voice through the garage door, heard my panic, heard me begging for help. Lucas had to testify. The judge allowed him to do it via video link from a private room, with me sitting beside him and holding his hand. He was so brave, my little boy. He answered every question, even when his voice shook, even when tears ran down his face. "Did you ask your uncle to let you out?" the prosecutor asked, gently. "Yes, every day. I knocked on the door and asked him to please come back, but he never did." "Were you scared?" "Yes. I thought I was going to die. I thought Grandma wouldn't find me in time." The defense attorney tried to argue that Michael had been under the influence, that he'd lost track of time, that he genuinely believed Lucas would be fine, but the texts proved otherwise. The plan had been deliberate, calculated. On the day of sentencing, I sat in the front row of the courtroom gallery, Lucas beside me. He'd asked to be there, said he needed to see what happened to his uncle. The therapist said it might help with closure. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Richardson, looked at Michael with something close to disgust. "Mr. Holloway, in my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many cases of child abuse and neglect, but this case is remarkable in its cruelty. You locked your 8-year-old nephew in a garage for 9 days with minimal food and water, not out of a moment of poor judgment or even neglect, but as part of a deliberate scheme to rob your own mother blind while she mourned your sister." Michael started to say something, but Judge Richardson held up her hand. The doctors testified that Lucas was approximately 12 to 24 hours from death when his grandmother found him. "Your nephew, the child who trusted you, who loved you, was dying in that garage while you gambled away your mother's life savings in Las Vegas. The psychological damage you've inflicted on this child is incalculable." She sentenced him to 18 years for child endangerment with aggravated circumstances, with additional consecutive sentences for the theft, fraud, and identity theft charges. In total, 25 years before possibility of parole. Amber received 8 years for her role as an accomplice. When the judge's gavel came down, Michael finally looked at me. His eyes were full of something I couldn't quite read. Regret? Anger? Fear? I didn't know. And I realized I didn't care. Lucas squeezed my hand. "Is it over, Grandma?" "Yes, baby. It's over." But it wasn't, not really. We had to go home to a house that felt haunted by what had happened, had to drive past the garage every single day, had to rebuild our lives from the wreckage Michael had left behind. The bank couldn't recover the money. The insurance company paid out a fraction of the value of the stolen jewelry. I had to go back to work part-time, taking a position at the local library, because my teacher's pension wasn't quite enough to cover everything Lucas needed. The therapy bills alone were staggering. But slowly, painfully, we healed. Lucas stopped having nightmares every night, then every few nights, then once a week. He started smiling again, laughing at silly videos on YouTube, playing with his friends at school. His teacher said he was thriving, that he was one of the brightest students she'd ever taught. We never talked about Michael, at least not in the way people probably expected. There was no forgiveness, no tearful reconciliation. I didn't visit him in prison. I didn't take his calls when he tried to reach out through his lawyer. I didn't read the letters he sent. Because here's what I learned. Forgiveness isn't always the right answer. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is cut someone out of your life completely, even if that someone is your own child. Sometimes, protection matters more than redemption. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry. If I hate him, the truth is more complicated than that. I'm angry, yes, furious. But I'm also heartbroken for the little boy Michael used to be, the one who didn't grow up to be a monster. I'm sad for the life he could have had, the person he could have been. But I'm not responsible for his choices, and I won't sacrifice Lucas's healing for the possibility of Michael's redemption. Lucas just turned 10 last month. We celebrated with a small party in the backyard, just him and a few friends from school. He blew out his candles and made a wish, and when I asked him what he wished for, he said, "I can't tell you or it won't come true." But later that night, when I was tucking him into bed, he looked at me with those serious brown eyes that look so much like Sarah's and said, "Grandma, I wished that we could be happy forever. Just you and me." "We will be, baby," I told him. "We already are." And you know what? We are. Not because what happened to us was okay, or because we've forgotten about it, or because we've forgiven the unforgivable. We're happy because we chose to be. Because every single day, we wake up and choose to focus on what we have instead of what was taken from us. Michael took my money. He took my sense of security. He took my jewelry and my trust, and 9 days of my grandson's childhood that we'll never get back. But he didn't take everything. He didn't take Lucas's spirit or his resilience. He didn't take our love for each other. He didn't take our future. Last week, Lucas came home from school with an art project. He'd made a collage about his family. There were pictures of me, of his mom Sarah smiling in a photo from before she got sick, of our house, of his friends. And in the center, in big colorful letters, he'd written, "Family isn't who you're born to. It's who would die for you." I hung it on the refrigerator, right next to his perfect spelling test and the drawing of a sunset he'd made in art class. And I thought about how right he was. Michael is in prison, and he'll be there for a very long time. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks about what he did, if he regrets it, if he lies awake at night and remembers the sound of his nephew calling for help through that garage door. But mostly, I don't think about him at all. Because the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's proving that they didn't break you. It's building a beautiful life from the ashes they left behind. Lucas and I are doing more than surviving. We're thriving. And for the first time since Sarah died, I can say with complete honesty that I'm happy. Not despite what happened, but because we survived it together. Because we chose each other over and over again. Because we learned that blood doesn't always mean family, and sometimes the strongest bonds are the ones we choose to keep. So, yes, I lost my son, but I saved my grandson. And given the choice, I'd make the same decision every single time. The innocence, the love, the pure goodness of a child is worth fighting for. It's worth everything. And that's the only justice that really matters.